In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. Om Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening, welcome back for class 2 of our part 1 of our exploration of the realizing the view. And this part is the Buddha, or Buddha Vachana, Buddha word, Abhidharma and Madhyamaka, beginning with the roots. So tonight we begin with Buddha word, called Buddha Vachana in the tradition. Vachana being speech, the speech of the Buddha, so the text attributed to the Buddha. And before we dive into that, just a little bit more on the view, this idea of view, and the view ranging from how our prejudices, our preconceived versions of things influence our experience of things. From the simplest level of like, oh, I hear that type of ice cream doesn't taste good, and then it actually has an impact on our taste of that ice cream. We actually can change our perception, our experience of sense perceptions by virtue of our view. And we all subconsciously walk around with a much more profound level of view of like, what is this world? What am I doing? Who am I in this world? And often we spend most of our time without reflecting on that, on what that is. But whether we reflect on it or not, we have an underlying assumption, or underlying ongoing sense of what the situation is of, oh, I'm a human being, I'm of a certain age, a certain type of human being, and I'm going to the store, or I'm going to work, or going to do this or that because of this and that. And it's like many of us work for many, many years with the view that we have to live, we have to work in order to live. And you probably heard this, that you can have a very different experience of life if you have the view that we live to work. And many people have that view. It's a very common view in the West that we live to work. That's our job. Our role in this world is to work and contribute. And there's other people who have the view that we work only so that we can live. And a lot of gradations in between, but that has a major impact on how we live our life. But more profoundly, the main view that we have is that we exist in a body, in space, on a planet, along with other creatures who have a self, who are a person, who are who they think they are. And we live in a universe that makes zero sense. And when you try to understand, like, what's the purpose? People say, what's the purpose of life? Why are we here? As if somebody placed you there with a certain intention placed us here. And the Buddhist view of the situation, without going into like the profound point of view of the Dharma, of things like egolessness and emptiness and so forth. It's just the Buddhist view is that all of this is the result of karma. Everything that is here is brought about by the workings of karma. And karma is not often well understood, but in particular, we tend to think that karma means there are discrete things, and they act upon each other and turn into other things, and those develop into other things, and that all along the way there are things that have interactions and functions. And so the Buddhist point of view is that there are no discrete things that are impacted by each other and change and morph into other things. But there's only a constant flux of changing unnamables. And so it's helpful to when we approach this course, this project of like, what is the Buddhist view? What is the view in Buddhism? And the view in Buddhism is said to be revolutionary, transformative. If you understand the Buddhist view, that's enlightenment. And so the idea in Buddhist tradition is that the view has a completely all-encompassing impact on our experience. And one of the main aspects of the Buddhist point of view is that we live in samsara. Our address is the desire realm, samsara number 108. In the desire realm of the three realms, we live in the most coarse, clunky realm called the desire realm, as opposed to the form realm and the formless realms. And all three of those together make up what we call samsara, and samsara is an endless round of births and rebirths and endless process of karma, the evolution of karma, and that there's multiple universes and infinite number of beings, infinite number of universes, and the vast majority of those are imperceptible to us. I think it's interesting to reflect upon that is the Buddhist point of view, that all of the characters we read about in Buddhist texts will have basically been brought up in that view, which I think gives a very different flavor to life and the process of the path than in the West. So I think it's helpful to reflect on that throughout our life, throughout our day, and approaching this material. Is what's the difference in the framework of the view that these authors, these individuals in the text that we read have? And what are they trying to convey to us? And how, to what extent does their overall view of the nature of their predicament impact their understanding of the view, and to what extent does ours? So we begin with the teachings of the Buddha as recorded in various texts that come down to us. And in our source book, I thought I would go through some of the readings, which is generally what we do in these classes, as we go through readings in detail and try to understand them and unpack them. So I'm going to screen share the readings for a bit. So the first text that we have a series of suttas, as they're called in the language in which they were recorded, the Pali language. When we say sutras, that's the Sanskrit version of that word. First one has this odd title, the Supreme Octet. When dwelling on views as supreme, a person makes them the utmost thing in the world, and from that calls others inferior. And so he's not gone beyond dispute. So we see in the Abhidharma tradition that evolves in the couple hundred years after the Buddha's death, in the classification of phenomena, there's a certain part of that classification is the mental factors. And in the mental factors, one of those, there's a set of those called major negative mental factors, in Sanskrit kleshas, which I think we're all familiar with, both experientially and the term. And one of those kleshas is wrong view. And wrong view has, in that scheme of kleshas, there's 6 kleshas, and the 6th one is wrong view. And wrong view has 5 parts. And they range from things like not accepting karma, not accepting the Four Noble Truths, to viewing the what's called the perishing collection, the perishable collection, which is a way of referring to the 5 skandhas that are all collections. Skandhas are aggregations or heaps, collections, and they're all impermanent. Viewing the collections, the 5 collections, as a person, as self, is the 3rd. And the 4th wrong view is having the view that one specific thing is supreme, such as standing on your head or doing one particular type of meditation or reciting one stanza or paying homage to stupas or meditation. Having the belief that one specific thing is the source of salvation universally. And the last one is this wrong view of thinking that one's own view is supreme, that one's own view is greater than all other views and is the most important and best thing in the world. And so we see in the sutra where the Buddha refers to this, that there's a nuance to the word view that maybe would not ordinarily be revealed by the way that I've at least have been talking about the view so far, which is as a way of understanding. But view here means holding any conceptual framework. When one sees one's own advantage in what's seen, heard, sensed, or inhabit and practices, seizing it there, one sees all else, all others, as inferior. and making that distinction of better and worse. That too, say the skilled, is a binding knot, that independence on which you regard another as inferior. So a monk should not be dependent on what's seen, heard, or sensed. And that's a major aspect of the situation. Generally, our view, when we talk about view, it's dependent on evidence that we use to support our view. And yet the Buddha is saying view should not be, one should not be dependent on those sources of evidence or on habits and practices, nor should one theorize a view in the world in connection with knowledge or habits and practices. Shouldn't take oneself to be equal, shouldn't think oneself inferior or superlative. One should not theorize a view in the world, abandoning what one has embraced, not clinging what doesn't make oneself dependent, even in connection with knowledge. Doesn't follow a faction among those who are split, doesn't fall back on any view whatsoever. One who is not inclined toward either side, becoming or not, here or beyond, who has no entrenchment when considering what's grasped among doctrines, hasn't the least theorized perception with regard to what's seen, heard, or sensed. By whom, with what should one be pigeonholed here in this world? This Brahmin who hasn't adopted views. So, by whom, with what should one be pigeonholed here in this world? I think this phrase, this Brahmin who hasn't adopted views, is referring to the speaker, the one that the Buddha is talking about, who should not be pigeonholed. And often the Buddha refers to the model individual as a Brahmin. And because the Brahmins were the religious, saintly, priestly class of individuals in the Indian system. But the Buddha, over and over again, when he was asked about what is a true Brahmin, and he was asked over and over again by individuals that would encounter him, because apparently this was a big issue in the Indian milieu of the time, of like, how does one genuinely be a religious person? How does one genuinely pursue Dharma, the truth? And he would regularly answer that by refuting, by denying that the normal, conventional ways of describing a Brahmin were actual characteristics of a Brahmin. And the normal characteristics at the time were things like sacrifice and wearing a certain type of robe. And there was a certain thread that one wore that was like, went to a ring in the nose and then was tied around, I think, one's toe or something. It was this odd Brahmin's, you see this reference to a Brahmin's thread. And he would regularly say a Brahmin is one who is upright and even and compassionate, loving, has loving kindness for all beings. And he would list the various factors of the path as he had taught them as being the elements of being a true Brahmin. So here we see him defining a Brahmin as one who has not adopted views. And so it's almost like the word view should really be translated as opinion or conceptual opinion. They don't theorize, they don't yearn, they don't adhere even to doctrines. So the ultimate anti-fundamentalism, where even the doctrines of the Buddha, if we cling to them, just become another hindrance and another excuse for dividing ourselves from others and thinking that we're better. A Brahmin not led by habits or practices, gone to the beyond, such doesn't fall back. So Brahman, like that, is gone beyond samsara and does not fall back from samsara. Any comments? Please just chime in. The next one is called the Great 40. Did anyone figure out we'll come to the math of how do we get to 40. But basically here we see the emphasis on right view as being the forerunner of all these other qualities. That instead of just like, okay, the Buddha said to do this, I'm going to do this. Or it feels good, it seems right, I'm going to do this. But everything comes from view. And in this case, he's not talking about opinion, he's talking about right view. What he's calling right view. So in this paragraph here, of those, he's gone through a list of factors that I believe are 8. It says view is the forerunner. One discerns wrong view as wrong view. Right view is right view. This is one's right view. And what is one's wrong view? There is nothing given, nothing offered, nothing sacrificed. This is wrong view. He's going to, right? There's nothing given, nothing offered, nothing sacrificed. There's no fruit or result of good or bad actions. So when I went through the 5 wrong views, I said one of them was not accepting karma. And this is an explanation of not accepting karma, being nihilistic. There is no this world, next world, no mother, father, no spontaneously reborn beings. It's sort of an interesting list, but basically denying everything. No contemplatives or Brahmins who faring rightly, practicing rightly, proclaim this world and the next, after having directly known and realized it for themselves. This is wrong view. What is right view? It has 2 sorts. Right view with effluence or outflows, sometimes translated as siding with merit and resulting in acquisitions. So right view is a view that accepts the workings of karma and engages in karmic activity. Once we understand how karma works and we accept karma, we strive for positive karmic situations by engaging in positive karmic activity. There is what is given, what is offered, what is sacrificed. It's an interesting phrase. Nothing before was nothing giving, nothing offered, nothing sacrificed. So this is referring to making offerings to the Dharma, making offerings to holy beings, which was a very common aspect of Indian life at the time. There are fruits and results of good and bad actions. There is this world and the next world. There is mother and father, spontaneously reborn beings, contemplatives and Brahmins who achieve realization. There is right view with effluence, siding with merit, resulting in acquisitions. It doesn't quite go on to explain these acquisitions, but we know from later teachings that acquisitions are the acquisition of positive karmic situations. Being healthy, being happy, being wealthy, being born in good situations, and so on and so forth. What is the right view that is noble without effluence? That view is transcendent and is a factor of the path. So the path alone is beyond the workings of karma. The discernment, the faculty of discernment, the strength of discernment, analysis of qualities as a factor of awakening, the path factor of right view in one developing the noble path, whose mind is noble, whose mind is without effluence, who is fully possessed of the noble path. This is the right view that is noble without effluence, transcendent, and a factor of the path. So these different qualities are factors of the right view that does not lead to the acquisition of positive karma, but leads beyond the entire cycle of karma beyond samsara. Samsara and karma basically being equivalent in some way, or being like a similar locus, let's say. One makes an effort for the abandoning of wrong view and entering right view. This is one's right effort. One is mindful to abandon wrong view and enter and remain in right view. This is one's right mindfulness. Thus, these three qualities, right view, right effort, and right mindfulness, run and circle around right view as the leader of them, as the forerunner. So that's the importance of right view for setting out on the path, is understanding what we're doing, understanding how things work. And it
Hey,
goes
Gary.
on. Yes, please.
To what extent do you think this is refuting specific views of other groups at the time versus like just a sort of broader view that's not necessarily specifically addressing the way other sects or whatever were viewing reality?
I think it's a general refutation of a simplistic, primitive way of viewing Brahmanism as being, um, well, for one, the nihilists. There was a nihilist school called the Charvaka school that was just very materialist school and felt there was nothing, there was no existence after death, there was no karma, just what you see is what you get. And so that's his first thing that he refutes in terms of nihilistic point of view. Um, and and I don't think he really goes beyond that in terms of a specific school in this one. We'll see that more in some of the other ones. Do you see anything specific?
Not exactly. It was more just, I know in other texts it's more obvious, and I was just sort of curious. This felt more general to me, but I wasn't sure if some of the points here really were speaking specifically to
Yeah,
certain things or not. But yeah, what you said makes sense.
yeah. Okay, so this basically continues in that same vein, going through a whole lists, a long list of factors that somehow ends up being 20 that are affiliated with skillfulness and 20 that are with unskillfulness. I couldn't quite come up to 20, but I don't know about you guys. But anyway, we'll trust his math. At least I will, since that's not crucial to the situation. And then we have, so we have this initial presentation of there being two levels of view or of frame of reference, that with effluence and acquisitions, the world of karma and the path of karma. So basically, in the early days, when the Buddha would encounter people coming to him with questions, if they were lay people, he would inspire them to positive karmic activity. And if they were renunciates of one type or another, he would inspire them to renunciation and the release from samsara, with and without effluence or acquisitions. So let's continue on. We have the famous sutta of Bahia. The Buddha was staying, as he often did, near Shravasti, or in Pali, Savatthi, at Jeta's Grove, King Anathapindika's monastery. And there was, on that occasion, there was a gentleman named Bahia of the Bark Cloth, and some other versions explain that he is called that because he had taken a vow to wear only bark cloth and no clothing made of other types of comfortable linens. So it was a form of asceticism to wear very uncomfortable clothing made out of bark. although that might depend on the tree that you take the bark from. But he's living nearby Suparaka by the seashore, and he was revered and the recipient of offerings. So that whole phrase above about offerings, making offerings, is a traditional thing that the lay individuals would do, is they would make offerings. That was sort of their role in the world and society, was to make offerings and thereby acquire positive karma, positive acquisitions, and achieve a better samsara in this life and in future lives. And they would offer robes, alms food, lodging, and medicines. And he for some reason, he comes up with this idea of thinking, am I an arhat? Am I one who has conquered all the enemies? An arhat is what the term means, having conquered one's enemies. And he seems to have a buddy in a form of a goddess who is formerly a blood relative, who can read his thoughts and goes to him and says, "No, you're not an arhat." Very, in my, I always was struck by how odd this is. This guy's thinking, "Am I an arhat?" And then it's like God appears, this voice appears, says, "No, you're not an arhat. You don't even have the practice whereby you would become an arhat or enter the path of arhatship." Ooh, then who in the world has entered this path? Are arhats. And she says, there's the Blessed One, an arhat, variously called arahant, spelled arahant or arhat, hunt, rightly self-awakened. He's living there. He's truly an arhat, teaches the Dhamma that leads to arhatship. So feeling deeply undercut, let's say, by this interchange, he immediately goes that night to meet the Buddha. Really quite impressive. And he goes and finds that the Buddha Sangha at Anathapindika's monastery, and he asks the monks who were doing walking meditation in the open air, as they generally did. They would the tradition is that they would basically meditate sitting down and alternate that with meditation walking up and down on the they would set themselves a walking path and basically go forward and backwards, forward, turn, and come back on the same line. No circling like we do today. He went to them and on arrival said, "Where's the Buddha? I want to see him." And he was told he went for alms. So I guess he arrived in the early morning, breakfast time, and so he runs into town and he encounters the Buddha. And this is an interesting way the Buddha describes of serene, inspiring, serene confidence, calming his senses at peace. His senses at peace, his mind at peace, having attained the utmost tranquility and poise, tamed, guarded, his senses restrained. This is a common way of describing the Buddha, who is sort of the embodiment of tranquility and peace and restraint, which means that your eyes stay on the ground. You don't really look at individuals that you encounter unless they address you. And particularly not of the opposite sex. One would not engage visually. Seeing him, he approached the Blessed One. On reaching him, he threw himself down and sat at the Blessed One's feet and said, "Please teach me the Dharma. Blessed One, teach me how to become an arhat for my welfare," and so forth. The Buddha says, "Not now." There's another. He has been up all night running, traveling to find him. And then he uses the royal, we have entered the town for alms. Apparently that was traditionally off limit. You don't ask the Buddha while he's going on rounds for teachings, pester him at that time. And by his insistence, says for a second time, "Please teach me." Who knows what dangers there may be for the Blessed One, the Buddha, or for my life. We may, die in the next moment. Who knows? Please teach me. Second time, the Buddha says, no, this is not the right time. A third time, he asks, and the Buddha answers. And this is another feature of the sutra, or the context of the Buddha when he lived. Is you see this throughout the sutras. Is if you ask three times, the third time one has to accept and like give in or do it. Uh, but often the Buddha was asked for things that he didn't really want to do, and he would just remain silent for two times or say no. And then if you asked the third time, it was sort of like, for some strange magical reason, he would be compelled to go along with it. And so that is what he does. He says, in reference to the seen, there will be only the seen and the heard and so forth, the cognized. Thus you should train yourself. For whatever there will be only in the seen, in reference to the seen, only in the heard, in reference to the heard, only in the sensed, only in the cognized, then Bahia, there is no you in connection with that. And where there is no you in connection with that, there is no you there. When there is no you there, you are neither here nor yonder, nor between the two. And just this is the end of stress. Stress, I think, being this translator's translation of the term dukkha, often translated as suffering.
Derek, I have a question.
Yeah.
So this three times thing is interesting. Is that why we go for refuge three times?
I don't think it's why we go for refuge three times, but I think it's an example of the same sort of thing of doing things three times. And that if you do things three times, they have an unusual power or certitude, or it makes it special.
Sharpening the point of intention.
Yeah, yeah, over and over again. Like if you say it once, it's like maybe it wasn't that important to you. If you say it twice, then oh, okay, maybe it's important. But three times, then yeah, it's something that's definitely important to you. So that is, they're both part of this tradition of doing things, saying things three times as being like really emphatic, really certain. And lo and behold, the bahia of the bark cloth right then and there was released from the effluence through lack of clinging and sustenance. And the Buddha leaves. Right there. That's it. And so the bahia of the bark rather cloth is enlightened. Just that one little thing. So there is no you in any of that experience of seeing, hearing, sensing, cognizing. There is no you. You are neither here nor are you yonder. So it's not like, oh, I'm not in my sense perceptions, but I'm somewhere else. But I'm not in the sense perceptions, I'm not somewhere else, nor am I between the two. He doesn't add the fourth member of what becomes a famous, what's called tetralemma, or four-limbed, four-optioned situation of you are not both here and there. And then lo and behold, he's killed by a cow. He's prescient. He seemed to have to know that he was going to die soon. And he's killed by a young cow and a calf who apparently approaches after seeing the Buddha and scares the cow, and the cow gores him with her horns, and he dies. And the Buddha says basically, honor this person as an enlightened one, and proclaims, where water, earth, fire, wind have no footing, then the stars don't shine. There the stars don't shine. The sun is invisible. There the moon doesn't appear. There darkness is not found. When a sage or Brahmin, through sagacity, what an odd translation of the term, through wisdom has realized this, the realm beyond this and that of all types, then from form and formless, from bliss and pain, he is freed. gone beyond completely all um, opposites. Any comments so far?
At first, I had trouble with affluent, and then I looked it up, and it was like, it's crap. That's,
It's
affluent
crap.
is crap. It goes, dumps into creeks and stuff. So then replaced affluent with crap, and it's to work. Is
Yeah, that's a little bit of a crass translation, but yeah, effluents are the outflows of the glaciers.
okay.
Well, there's because later he says there's right view that has effluence. So it's not always crap, but it's karmic residue. It has it leads to something else. It results in something else. And so in this translation, he calls that attainments. That there's a positive and negative attainments from the effluence, from the activity, the karmic activity, and that the path alone is goes beyond karma, beyond effluence, and beyond attainment. Oh, let's see. Okay, so then we enter a couple of we have a couple of versions of these famous encounters where the Buddha is asked all these questions and remains silent, even asked multiple times. It doesn't. The third time rule doesn't even work on this one. And we see in the introduction by Wollstone Fletcher to the introduction to the Middle Way, where he traces the origin of the Madhyamaka tradition to the Buddha's silence, which are demonstrated in these two sutras, the Sutra of all the effluence, and more famously, this Sutra of Vachagota. Vachagota. Let's see. The wanderer went to the Blessed One and arrived and exchanged greetings with him. After an exchange of greetings and courtesies, he sat to one side. Now, usually the normal occurrence is that one would encounter the Buddha, circumambulate him 3 times, and then sit on his right side. There was this whole thing about the right hand, the right side as being a positive, and sitting on the left or approaching from the left was considered to be inauspicious. Talk about superstition. So some light chit chat goes on between the Vachagota and the Buddha. He says, now they mastered Gautama. So Gautama is the Buddha's family name. His given name was Siddhartha. So Siddhartha Gautama. Here we have Gautama, which I guess is the Pali. And normally we see the Sanskrit, which is Gautama. Gautama. Is the cosmos eternal? That has not been said by me. I didn't say that. The Buddha says, I didn't say the cosmos is eternal. Then Master Gautama, is it not eternal? That has not been said by me either. Is it finite? Is it infinite? Is the body the same as the soul? Is the body one thing and the soul another thing? Does the Tathagata exist after death? What happens to a Buddha after death? Does the Buddha not exist after death? Is there an extinction? And nirvana, remember, does mean extinction, a blowing out. And so there was this implication from that term, the use of that term, that one who has attained nirvana upon death does not exist. Does the Tathagata both exist and not exist? Does the Tathagata neither? So here we have the full tetralemma of the 4 options, this or that, neither or both. All of those have not been said by me now. Master Gautama, what is the cause? What's the reason why when wanderers of other sects are asked in this way they answer? The cosmos is eternal or non-eternal or finite or infinite, etc. Yet when we ask you, you don't answer in any way at all. Vacha, the members of other sects assume form to be the self, or the self as possessing form, or form as in the self, or the self as in form. And this becomes a very famous scheme of the different relationships between the self and the skandhas. And there's this set of normally 4 options of the relationship between the self and the skandhas, making a total of 20 views. The so-called 20 wrong views, that thinking that there's a relationship between the self and one of the skandhas that is contextualized in one of these ways. So they assume form to be the self, or possessing, or form is in it. So the self possesses form. Sorry, form possesses self, or the self as in form. Form is in the self is in form. The form and the self are identical. The self possesses form, so the self is the larger set and form is a member of the set, or form as in the self. It's not possessed, but it's part of the self, or the self is part of form. And they goes through the other skandhas: feeling, perception, an interesting translation, fabrications, and consciousness. And so that is why when asked in this way, they answer the cosmos is eternal, or the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death. But the Tathagata, worthy and rightly awakened, doesn't assume form to be the self, etc., etc., the other skandhas as well. 4 options for each, a total of 20, and therefore he does not answer anything about the cosmos being eternal or the Tathagata existing or not. Strangely, there's no further questioning here. It's like, why don't you answer? That's like the most bizarre thing. It's like, why? Why don't you answer? And so he just gets up and leaves. I guess he felt insulted or something. But then he goes to one of the Buddha's two main disciples, Shariputra and as the other one, Moggallana. And on arrival, exchange greetings, sits on one side. He asks the same question. He gets the same exact answer. And he makes a point of being shocked by that.
Derek, could
Yeah.
I ask about the difference in the words that are translated as consciousness and awareness in the script, in the texts?
Where do you see awareness?
I didn't see it in this sutra, but awareness is so frequently used in the texts, and when I was reading about consciousness, I just became curious about the two. I am assuming there's 2 different words, but I wasn't sure how they related to our words, consciousness and awareness, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's sort of all over the map. It depends on the translator, depends on the tradition. In earlier, in later traditions, awareness is loaded with meaning and is often differentiated from consciousness and implies a sort of non-dual cognizance, non-dual experience, awareness. Awareness in the earlier tradition is either an alternate let's see, it's not usually an alternate translation of consciousness. It is often the way consciousness is defined. Consciousness is defined as awareness of an object. But consciousness is also, sorry, awareness also is commonly the translation of one of the major factors of shamatha. The most famous factor of shamatha that we all know about is mindfulness, which is smriti, in Sanskrit smriti, and the other factor is the term samprajanya, 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 which is cognate, related with the term prajna, which is transcendent knowledge, higher knowledge, and samprajanya has a more down-to-earth meaning as understanding or experience that happens along with. So the sam means along with. It can either mean along with or it can mean perfected. Like we have sam yak, sam Buddha is completely perfected Buddha. But in this case, the sam is that in Samprajanya it occurs along with. And the idea is that it's the knowing that occurs with mindfulness. Mindfulness is the function of focused attention, and samprajanya is the cognizance that is so if we use the term cognizance for like general mind or manas in Sanskrit, mind or minding, the function of mind is cognizance.
Can I just interrupt briefly? Is that the fabrications in this last sutra you were like that translation of the fabrications?
Yeah, fabrications is the translation of the fourth skanda, right? And the fourth skanda is extrapolated into the 51 mental factors, which we probably heard. And the list of 51 is a later version stemming from a Sangha. And the earlier version has 46 mental factors, or differing numbers of mental factors. But the mental factors are not consciousness, but they're factors that occur with consciousness. And so awareness would, in the sense of samprajanya, would be, and in some systems in a Sangha's version, it is one of the mental factors. So it's a quality or a faculty of mind that accompanies consciousness. And it's one of the most basic ones. There's a list of 5 that are what are called the omnipresent mental factors that occur in every moment of consciousness, has those 5 mental factors occurring, which is like contact, attention, awareness, knowing, focus, not for, a concentration, and then understanding. So it has those terms of like samadhi and prajna. But it just means that in every moment of mind, the mind connects with its object, whatever that may be, and it knows its object in a relative sense. But anyway, so that awareness would be that quality of supporting the mindfulness, which is focused attention, and seeing in what way the attention is present. Is it present strongly or weakly? Is it focused narrowly or widely? And so forth. And it's an essential factor of shamatha, those two, that focusing on an object and then knowing whether we're on that object or not. And then we're said to cultivate both those qualities throughout the practice and the path of shamatha, of that quality of knowing our meditation, and that quality of knowing or presently knowing what's going on is what eventually turns into vipassana, higher seeing. By having that quality of looking at what's going on, we begin to see the absence of self.
Thank you.
For sure. So let's see these last sutras. So this last sutra talks about what we know as the 12 nidanas, or the interdependent origination. And it's a good example of the refinement of one's view that occurs during one's engagement with the Buddhist path, is that there tends to be a very different understanding of the pratitya samutpada, interdependent origination, by probably all of us when we first hear of this teaching and engage in this teaching, and we see this list. The 12 nidanas. From ignorance comes fabrications, in this case the translation of samskara, mental factors, and from that comes consciousness, and from that comes name and form, which is shorthand for the body-mind complex. And it is a little bit of a confusing thing. There you can find some discussions about that, because it's not quite like when you look at the skandhas, the 5 skandhas, you can sum up the 5 skandhas in name and form. The form skandha is obviously form, and the rest are name, in the sense of not being form, being sort of the world of the mind. But here we have ignorance, and as the root fabrication, right? We said that ignorance was one of the 6 root kleshas, and from that comes fabrications, the remainder of the mental factors, and from the mental factors come consciousness. But here, fabrications, it's a translation of this term samskara, and samskaras have a different sense in this scheme than they do in the skandha scheme. But initially we think, oh, ignorance produces or results in samskaras, and that samskaras brings about consciousness, and consciousness brings about this, and that brings about the 6 sense faculties, and with the 6 sense faculties we then have contact being a cognizant, an experience of the mind, not like a physical experience. And from that comes feeling, and from that comes craving, wanting. And craving is actually shorthand for wanting and not wanting. There's like an emotionally charged tone to the experience that one has engaging in objects. And then from that comes clinging. I don't know where it comes up with sustenance, but clinging. Normally we see these translated as clinging or craving, and then grasping. And this is this famous situation in the nidanas where we're told there's an opportunity to shift the chain of causation here and not keep circling. That craving is unavoidable. There's an instantaneous craving until one develops much further on the path, but that here one can actually reduce the karmic momentum of the nidanas by recognizing the craving and letting go of the clinging that would otherwise naturally arise from it. But the main point is that we tend to think that there's a one-to-one correlation and that one thing produces the other. And the terminology tries to avoid that situation where we say, from fabrications, or in other translations we have, where there is fabrication or where there is ignorance, then samskaras arise. And when there are samskaras, then consciousness arises. So consciousness would not arise if there were no samskaras, but it's not like samskaras produces consciousness in a one-to-one factor. And so there's there's another famous sutra which I didn't find and went for this one instead, where the Buddha talks about how some monks misunderstand this scheme as thinking that this causes that. And he goes to some length saying, I didn't say that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when there's the condition of, here he's used this term as a requisite condition. But the system of causality in Buddhism is a complex compilation of many different factors that lead to causation. So there's never a one-to-one correlation of this causes that. There's only that we can identify certain phenomena that are present along with others, and together they create the conditions for the arising of another phenomena. And this ultimately leads to the understanding of causation as being not the progression of one thing into another thing or interacting with another thing as if both things had independent existence, but as just a flux of what we later call appearances. Anyway, so this is one of the, I think, famous examples of right view as distinguished from view, where the term view often is taken to be somewhat of a pejorative of an opinion or a wrong view or a wrong understanding. And that right view is based on experience and analysis based on that experience. And so the Buddha's, this article talks a little bit more about the Buddha's silence as being the seat of the Madhyamaka tradition, which is really the focus of this class, is what is the middle way? What is the correct view in the Buddhist tradition? Correct understanding of the nature of reality. And without explaining it, without extrapolating on it, but just by demonstrating silence, the Buddha is communicating that the correct view, the correct understanding of the nature of reality is one that is not encapsulated by words, is not communicated by words and or theories. As he says there, any theory such as this or that, which are all conceptual constructs, and that true right view goes beyond any type of conceptualizing, the jungle of theorizing, the jungle of, we'll see later, the jungle of wrong views, the wilderness of theorizing, the tangle of theorizing, the bondage and shackles of theorizing. So the Buddha was not into theorizing. And so we should keep that in mind as we engage in this course, which it would be very easy to fall into the feeling of this is just an extended theoretical exploration of coming up with an ever more and more refined theory about the way things are. And the idea is that it's very much not that.
May I make a comment?
Anytime.
I found there in this article, or in this, there was a sentence: faced with the mystery of the cosmos, the spirit naturally tries to interpret what it encounters, and where knowledge is lacking, it will fill the void with speculation or myth. And I thought it was a perfect description of the current state of AI. And I
That's great. Yeah, it's a perfect description of humans over the ages and now of AI, which, yeah, go on. Which,
Yeah, which again is, maybe this is our the flaws in our intelligence, the flaws in our uh, human intelligence. But I thought it was just it
yeah,
just
yeah, it's a great
came out,
phrase.
yeah,
That,
popped
that,
out,
that
yeah.
phrase is cool. And from what little I know of AI, which is very little, I understand that AI has no problem filling in what it doesn't know. Is that what other people have encountered?
Is that what they call the hallucinations of AI?
Yeah, I
Yes,
think so.
yeah.
Just,
So
just
yes.
as a quick aside, I photographed it. There's a billboard in Times Square, picture of a woman's face, and underneath it says, "Don't hire humans."
Oh God,
The new
unbelievable,
the new employee is AI.
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's fairly
That's pretty shocking.
it's funny, but it's also shocking.
It is. Wow. So we have a little time left, and I would love to go through Nagasena and Melinda because next week the article on Abhidharma is both very profound and long. So if no one else has any other comments on these sutras, let's dive into that. And so Nagasena was translated many, many years ago, first by uh, a woman, Rise Davis, I think, T.H. Rise Davis, when the early Pali Canon texts were translated in a sort of biblical way, and then by a gentleman named I.B. Horner, also many, many years ago. And finally, just recently, and I'm sorry I didn't get into the source book, but this other translation, very good translation, is available now. So let's go through this wonderful exchange through Nagasena, a monk in probably the Theravada tradition because it's becomes a major text of this tradition. And this king who apparently was put in charge of India after Alexander the Great conquered India. When was Alexander the Great? In 1 or 200 before the Common Era, something like that. Anyway, so this king is quite educated, but also quite powerful, and I found the dynamic between their communication, the way they refer to each other, fascinating. But that it's not critical to the meaning, obviously, but it is very fascinating. The King Melinda hears about this great Buddhist teacher, Nagasena, and approaches him to engage him in conversation. Addresses him cordially, exchange polite, friendly greetings, and sits down to one side. Nagasena pleases the King Melinda with his greetings in reply. And the king asks, how are you know? What is your name? I am Nagasena. and my fellow monks call me Nagasena. My parents gave me names like that, various names, yet Nagasena is just a word. So at every chance, Nagasena launches into a sort of Madhyamaka response, the Nagarjuna type response of like, these are just words, just concepts. It's just a word, an appellation, a designation, a common usage. That is a mere name. A mere name, and no person is found here. At this, Melinda says, now listen to me, all 500 Yonakas. So he's in a place in India where I guess the Yonakas live, and 80,000 monks, and clearly they have no problem exaggerating in these texts. No way there was 80,000 monks, but this Nagasena just told me that no person is found here. Can this be right? So this great, cool scene where like the king is meeting this great, revered teacher, and all these people are going to watch because it's going to be an interesting. And the king, and the quality of showmanship, like turns to the crowd. Hey, all you here. And he doesn't have a loudspeaker, but somehow he's going to get the attention of 80,000 monks. He says, can this be true? There's no person found here. King Melinda turns to Nagasena. If there's no person, then who is it that gives you a robe? And immediately like comes back to like, I gave you that robe, the alms bowl, and so forth. And who uses these? Who protects moral discipline? Who is it that practices and engages in the path? Who practices meditation, realizes the path, its fruit, and nibbana? Who is it that destroys life, takes what is not given, behaves with desire and lust, tells lies, drinks alcohol, and commits, this is the opposite of the monk. Commits the 5 karmic acts that bring about immediate retribution. So this king is very knowledgeable about Buddha Dharma, knows these schemes of the 5 karmic acts that have immediate consequence. So this is so. There cannot be anything good or bad, or anyone who does good and bad actions or causes others to do so, and no fruit or result of virtuous or immoral karma. And Nagasena, if someone were to kill you, his act would not be considered murder. How could you have a teacher, a master at ordination? You said, great king, my fellow monks, call me Nagasena. But what is here is Nagasena? What is the hair on your head, Nagasena? Sir, what is the hair on your head, Nagasena? So the king immediately goes to one of the biggest conundrums in the Buddhist tradition is, how can there be karma without a self? Because in the tradition prior to the Buddha that he grew up with, then karma was universally accepted, but there was a soul, there was an Atman, and it was a very simple logic that karma accrued to in some way, without any real sophistication, but somehow the Atman was subject to one's accumulation of karma. And that sort of made sense. There's an agent, and that agent accumulates karma and does this and that. So then what is the hair on your head, Nagasena? No. Is the hair on your body, Nagasena? No, great king. The nails, teeth, skin, flesh. So I didn't count these, but usually there's 32 parts that they go through of the body. Are any of these Nagasena? No, great king. What is it then, sir? Is your form Nagasena? No, great king. Is your feeling? Is your perceiving? It goes through the 5 skandhas. This king knows a lot of Dharma. Is your awareness? So here we have this translator. It's translating consciousness as awareness. Jill. This is neat. No, great king. Well, then is Nagasena. All of these together, what's the relationship? Is it one of the skandhas? Is it the package of the skandhas? Is it something other than the skandhas? No, no, no. So, sir, rather, through questioning, though questioning you again and again, I do not see Nagasena. So is Nagasena merely a sound? What here is Nagasena? You have spoken a falsehood, a lie, for there is no Nagasena. That's not, you can't quite tell what the temperature is, but is he accusing him of lying to the great king? In response, the Reverend Nagasena turns to the king. Great king, you've been delicately brought up as a kshatriya, which is a warrior class, and are exceedingly delicate. Funny thing to be selling. If you were to set out on foot at midday on the hot ground, on the scorching sand, treading on the sharp gravel, stones, and sand, your feet would hurt, your body would ache, your mind would be flustered, and there would arise a painful awareness of your body. Surely you did not come on foot, but instead by vehicle? What are the options for vehicles? I did not come by foot, but rather I came by chariot. If you came by chariot, then tell me about the chariot. Is the pole, the chariot, great king? No. Is the axle, the wheels, the frame, the flagstaff, the yoke, the reins, the goat? No. Then are all of these parts together the chariot? No. Then, through no questioning you again and again, great king, I do not see a chariot. Is this chariot merely a sound? No. What then is the chariot? You have spoken a falsehood, a lie, for there is no chariot. You're the chief king in all of Jambudvipa. So Jambudvipa means the rose apple, fruit land of the rose apple. And for some reason is the name of the realm where humans abide, and was sort of equivalent to India, vaguely. But when you look at the cosmology, it seems to be larger. But anyway, simplistically, India. You're the chief king in all of India. Of whom are you frightened that you would utter a falsehood? Please listen to me, all 500 Yonakas and 80,000 monks. This king declared, I came by chariot, but when asked if you came by chariot, then tell me about it. He does not produce the chariot. Can this be right? Dressed in this way, the 500 applaud, and the Reverend Nagasena says to the king, now, great king, are you able to reply? The king turns to Nagasena. Nagasena, I am not telling a falsehood, since it is because of a pole, because of an axle, because of the wheels, because of the frame, and so on and so forth, that there comes to be the chariot, which is just a word, a mere name. Nagasena says, well done, great king, you understand the chariot. It's the same with me. It's because of the head hair, the body hair, and so on, all the way up to the brain matter and the skull. And it's because of the 5 skandhas that there comes to be Nagasena, which is just a word, a mere name, but in the absolute sense. The absolute sense. So we see in this, even in this early text, this identification that there's like a relative sense, or common, like a common simplistic sense, and an absolute sense. There is no person found here. And so later we obviously, clearly we call these the two truths, the relative and the absolute. In reference to this very point, the non-Vajira said this in the presence of the Bhagavan, the Buddha. So he's quoting a sutra, just as the chariot is a word used when there is an assemblage of parts, so too it is conventional to say that there is a being when there is only a collection of clusters. So this scheme of the famous scheme of the chariot that Nagasena is using to teach the king the Dharma of selflessness starts with the Buddha, where there's a nun named Vajira who's asked, in the presence of the Buddha, asked by some other being, type of being, to explain some aspect of the Dharma, the selflessness. And she explains it using the chariot analogy, which the implication is that she got that from the Buddha. Wonderful Nagasena, marvelous Nagasena, so too it is a convention. It is conventional to say that there is a being when there is only a collection of clusters. Wonderful. The answers in reply to my questions are brilliant. If the Buddha was standing here, he would give his approval. And we see this phrase come down in the ages in various teachings. If all the Buddhas of the 3 times were present, they would not disagree. You probably have seen that in various texts. Excellent, Nagasena, are these brilliant answers in reply to the questioning. How many years, Nagasena, have you been ordained? I am 7 years in, great king. How is it that you are 7? Are you 7, or is the number 7? King's, getting a little feeling like he wants to have some fun with this idea. Just at that moment, the shadow of King Melinda, dressed up, decked out, adorned with all his ornaments, was seen on the ground, and his reflection was seen also in a water pot. So then the Reverend Nagasena turns to the king and says, "This shadow of yours, great king, is seen on the ground and reflected in this water pot. Are you the king, or is the shadow the king?" Nagasena, I am the king. The shadow is not the king, for it occurs entirely dependent upon me. Similarly, 7 is the number of years. I am not 7, for 7 occurs entirely dependent on me, just as in the example of the shadow. Well done, Nagasena, well done. The king says, "Will you converse with me?" Great king, if you converse with the arguments of scholars, I will converse with you. But if you converse the way kings argue, I will not. How do scholars converse? In the debates of scholars, they are entangling and unraveling, refuting and countering, and agreeing and disagreeing. But scholars do not get angry. This is how they converse. In kings, when kings debate, one account is approved, and whoever disputes it invites punishment. Have him punished. This is how kings converse. And the king says, "Okay, I will promise you I won't harm you if we have a disagreement. I will speak the way scholars speak." Very well, then the monk says, "Nagasena, I will ask you something. It is, please ask, great king. It has already been asked by me." "Then it has been answered, great king. But what has been answered by you? What has been asked by you?" I think that was a little play on words. "I will ask you something, please, great king." And then the king says, "I just asked." That's like when you say, "Can I ask you a question?" And you've already asked the question. I think, I don't know. It occurs to the king, this scholarly monk is competent to converse with me, and there'll be many things that we want to talk about. Yet the sun will set, so let me speak with him in my inner quarters tomorrow. So it says, inform the elder, turns to some minister or whatever, inform the elder that tomorrow in the inner quarters I will converse with the king. Now this we're almost out, and this part is somewhat irrelevant, but I found it fascinating, this little part here. Inform the elder that tomorrow we'll talk in the inner quarters. And having announced that, he rises from his seat and takes leave, mounts his horse. I don't know what happened to the chariot, but he rides off, repeating, "Nagasena, Nagasena." So then the minister goes to speak to Nagasena, and the king said, "You should come tomorrow," and the monk was satisfied. Later, he and some others approached the king, and they say, "Do you really want this monk to come?" I love this, like checking with him. "You didn't really mean that." He says, "Yes, let him come." "How many monks should we come with? Should he come with? Can we keep this simple?" And he says, "Let as many monks as he wants come with him." And they said, "Let him come with 10 monks." And the king replies for a second time, "Let him have as many monks as he wants." A second time, this other person says, "Let him come with 10. And the king says a third time, "Let him come with as many as he wants." And the third time, this person contradicts the king. All the hospitality is prepared, so I say, "Let as many as he wants come with him." And yet you say otherwise. Is it that I cannot give a meal to the monks? And at this point, this other person is abashed. And so, okay. So then they approach Reverend Nagasena, and when they had come before him, the Sir King Melinda said, "Let as many monks as they want come with him." So they finally give in, and they let him bring his entire 80,000 monks. And this other guy is going to pick up the act here. It says, when I approached Nagasena while he's walking, and asked Nagasena, when I say, "Nagasena, where is?" And the elder says, but what do you think is Nagasena here? I think Nagasena is the inner breath, it is the soul as it comes and goes. So this is one of the views of the Atman. But when this breath is gone and not entered, or entered, but not left, is the person still alive? No, sir. When conch blowers blow the conch, does the breath re-enter them? No. When bamboo, no, no, no. But why do they not die? I'm not able to converse with this kind of talk. Please just tell me what this means. The attendant just gives up and says, I don't know. You got me. So the elder teaches them on the Abhidharma, the inhalation and exhalation are activities of the body and are not the soul. And at this person declares himself a lay follower of the Buddha. He reaches the quarters of the king, goes up to him and sits down in the appointed seat, and then with his own hand the king provided and served Nagasena and the assembly food, both substantial and fine. He presents each monk with a pair of clothes, and the Reverend Nagasena with 3 robes, telling him, please sit here with 10 monks and let the others depart. After they had all eaten, and King Milena, observing that he had eaten and removed his hand from a bowl, which is, sort of like this sign that I'm finished. Because as you must know, they ate with their hands, right? So he had his hand in his bowl, meaning he was still eating, or when he took his hand out, he's finished. The king takes a low seat and sits on one side and asks Nagasena, what should we talk about? Great king, we seek a purpose, so let us talk about a purpose. For what purpose did you ordain? What is your highest purpose? Why is it? Why? It is so that suffering is destroyed and further suffering does not arise. And that is the purpose of our ordaining, and our highest purpose is final nirvana without attachment. But do all ordain for this purpose? No. Some people ordained for this purpose, some ordained because of fear of the king. It was one way of getting out of being in the army, being conscripted, or being attacked, being part of a people that were being attacked by the king. If you entered the order, you were free from these generally. Fear of the king, ordained because of fear of thieves. There was a sort of etiquette where robbers would generally not bother monks. But those who rightly ordain for this purpose. And did you ordain for this purpose? I was ordained as a youth, and I didn't know I was ordaining. I love his honesty. It's I just did what I thought I should do. But I did think that these renouncers in the lineage of the Sakya were learned, and that they would train me in the precepts, and so I was trained by them. And now, i.e. gradually, I know and see that ordaining is for this purpose. Anyway, they continue on and on, and he gradually through conversation, they go through. It's a huge text, and they go through every topic in the Abhidharma, and basically the king asking him, what is the defining characteristic of attention? So it's Jill asking, what is awareness? And Nagasena saying, awareness is this and this. And then he goes to the next characteristic. Defining characteristic of attention is examining, and the defining characteristic of understanding is cutting through. How is attention defined as examining, and understanding defined as cutting through? Please give an analogy. So then he keeps asking Nagasena to give analogies. And Nagasena is endlessly capable of coming up with these analogies, which is pretty amazing. Anyway, we are out of time, and so this is just starting to scratch the surface by looking at the presentation of the basic structure, the basic context and scheme for the path, and for understanding, and for what is right view and what is view that we cultivate. Any comments, questions, thoughts before we conclude?
So we just got a lesson in emptiness.
Basically, yeah. That was egolessness, emptiness, yeah, from Nagasena, the prototypical so-called like Helianist or Theravada. Yeah, he's quite an amazing. That interchange is quite an amazing interchange. Very cool. So let's do our chant and conclude. I should circulate the chants so people have them that may be unfamiliar with them. I'll show them in the meantime. The dedication of merit. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may it free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May that arc ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone. So see you next week where we dive headfirst into Abhidharma. Headfirst. Thank you. Have a great week. Take care.